In tonight's stories, the ground swallows towns, the woods take friends, and the dead still find your number. A small town charity hides a creature that must be fed. A hiker disappears into the White Mountains and sends one last photo from the dark. And a mother's ghost texts her son with a warning that comes too late. 4 tales of hunger, haunting, and the things that never rest. Welcome to Nightmare Proof, where true horror comes alive. Here, you'll hear real stories of the strange, the disturbing, and the unexplainable. Turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to face the darkness. Story 1. My town had a food drive every year called Help Feed Bobby. My hometown was an odd place. We had a video store that never had the movies I wanted, a convenience store whose slushy machine was always broken, and a yearly food drive with a weird name, Help Feed Bobby. If you're thinking, who's Bobby, then you had something in common with my 10-year-old self, every other kid in town, and the people just passing through during the time the food drive was active. We did ask our parents, teachers, and basically any adult why it was called that. But the standard answer was that Bobby was just meant to represent children whose parents couldn't afford food regularly. The other one was that Bobby is meant to be an acronym, but when pressed on what BOBY is supposed to spell out, they always found a way to stop or change the conversation. For the longest time, the most information we received was that, at the end of the drive, some people would volunteer to take all the donated food to its intended destination, and then, around the same time the following year, it would start all over again. One day, my dad came home and told my mom and me that he was going to have to go out next Saturday, as he had volunteered to help deliver the donated food to its recipients. I tried to ask him where the food was going, and if I could come with him, but he shot both questions down with, "Sorry, sport, grown-ups only." I wanted to know so badly that I came up with a plan. On the day he was supposed to deliver the food, my dad came home with a truck full of donation boxes. As sneakily as I could, I snuck into the back of the truck, emptied the contents of one of the boxes, and ducked down inside. I realized that the chances of being caught were high, but I didn't care. I wanted to see where all this food went every year. After about an hour, I heard the truck start and felt it move. I wanted to poke my head out and see, but I knew my dad could just check the rearview mirror and spot me. Another possible 3 hours, and I felt the truck come to a stop. I heard my dad get out of his truck, and some other volunteers getting out of their cars. I couldn't really hear the conversation at the time. I did feel someone grabbing the box I was in. "Damn, what's in this? Watermelons and ham?" He continued to grumble as he carried the fourth box somewhere I couldn't see. It was maybe 45 minutes before he finally placed the box down. I got excited. I would finally see where the food went to. I waited until I didn't hear any more footsteps before I exited the box and started to look around. It was a large cavern. I saw what I presumed was the entrance. The place was lit by what I assumed were battery-operated lights, with boxes of donated food stacked everywhere. Looking out on the other side, I saw a cliff edge. Walking to it, I looked over the edge. I don't know how deep it went. I just knew it was the size of a football stadium. I kept thinking to myself, what was the point of this food drive? Why bring all the food to some cave? And for the 1,000th time, who is Bobby? I felt the rumbling before I heard it. Then I saw the cavern begin to shake violently. Looking down, I saw something begin to emerge from the darkness. It looked like the beginning of a bright orange beak. From there, a head only slightly smaller. Then the hole itself took form. Imagine if a turtle's head were covered in spikes, and you'd have the beginning of what its head looked like. It stopped at about 15 feet from the top of the cliff edge and began to open its large beak. I was paralyzed with fear. I didn't know what this thing was going to do. For all I knew, it was about to breathe fire or grab me with some kind of frog tongue, but it just stayed there, like it was waiting for something. That's when I realized this was Bobby. This thing came up here. It knows someone will feed it, because it's been fed every year for God knows how long. And this was only the head and neck of it. I couldn't fathom how big the rest of Bobby could be. My fascination, horror, was cut short by the sounds of my dad and the other volunteers coming back down the cave path. I ran back over to the box I was hiding in, but realized they would probably start with that one, so I went to a stack of them near the entrance and crouched down next to it. My plan was, once they all walked past, I was going to run back up and hide in my dad's truck. The voices and footsteps became audible as my dad and the other volunteers returned. Okay, that should be the last of it. Then we get a break for another year. I wish we could just cover everything in cyanide. Nice wish. There's not enough poison on the planet for that. Then I heard my dad. He sounded nervous. Even if it worked, how do we know that the body wouldn't stink up the whole town? Wait, I see its head. Then I heard my dad's first time seeing Bobby. Jesus Christ. I could hear the terror in my dad's voice. I almost wanted to run out of hiding and go hug him, let him know I saw it too, and he wasn't alone in his fear, but I knew that could make things bad for both of us. Another volunteer disregarded my dad's terror and nonchalantly remarked, "Let's get started. Just grab a box and throw it at the thing's mouth." I watched as they all started grabbing boxes and taking them to the edge. When it looked like all of their backs were turned, I quietly snuck to the entrance and ran back up to the mouth of the cave. From there, I saw my dad's truck and made my way to the back. A few weeks later, I was at the library trying to see if there was any more information about Bobby. I should have expected my town wouldn't keep records about a giant turtle monster living underneath it, but what was there was still helpful. The monster was most likely named after the town founder, Bobby Robertson, and during times of famine, the town was prone to tremors and was nearly destroyed during the Great Depression by a sudden magnitude 3 earthquake. My guess is that the townsfolk of the time decided they needed the food more than Bobby, and he voiced his disapproval. I don't think my dad ever figured out that I was there with him that night, but I made it a point to spend more time with him, though I had to pretend that I wasn't also scared of turtles now. The next year, he did not volunteer to assist with Help Feed Bobby. In fact, he had gotten a promotion at work, and we had to move away because of it. So, for the past 22 years, I was able to let Help Feed Bobby slowly fade into my memories. Until a few days ago, when I was struck by nostalgia for my old hometown, so I started looking into what had happened since we moved. My hometown doesn't exist anymore. At some point in 2005, the town collapsed and sunk into the ground. The official explanation was that there were multiple caves under the town, and a long overdue mass cave-in had finally happened. It was harder to find any more information on what the town was like before the cave-in, but the most relevant piece I found came from a Facebook group for it. I learned that new people had replaced the previous town council in 2004, and in the same year, they voted to end the Help Feed Bobby food drive. Story 2. Something in the White Mountains took my friend. My name is Ethan. This story happened in October of 2016, when 4 of my friends and I took a weekend hiking trip up in northern New Hampshire, more specifically the White Mountains. We were all college students at a fairly local university, which, if you're from or familiar with New Hampshire, you know how beautiful the mountains are in the fall. It was me, Kyle, Danielle, Mason, and Jake. All being students in New Hampshire, we're all pretty experienced with trails. Nothing insane like technical climbing or backcountry survival, but enough that we'd seen our fair share in the woods prior. We picked a bit as popular trail to avoid the foliage tourists planning to camp about halfway up and finish by late Sunday. The first day was completely normal. Cold, crisp air, quiet even. We made camp that night without any issue. The sun set normal timing for the season, around 6 p.m. We built a fire just off the trail, cooked, had a few beers, and went to bed in our 2 tents, guys in one, Danielle in the other. That's when everything truly started. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to what I thought were footsteps. Not like heavy stomping or anything, but soft, slow crunches in the leaves, just outside the tent. As I said, we've seen our fair share in the woods before this trip. I figured it was a deer, or maybe even a black bear sniffing around if we were really unlucky. But then it stopped, and stayed quiet for way too long. I held my breath, trying to listen. Then Mason, who was next to me, whispered, "You hear that too?" I said yeah, and we both just stayed frozen. Then, a twig snapped. Not random, this sounded deliberate, like someone stepping right outside the tent. Kyle, half asleep, mumbled, "Chill, it's probably an animal," but it didn't feel like that. You know when you know someone's watching you? After a bit, it went silent again. I don't know how long we laid there, but I finally drifted off, again. The next morning, I asked Danielle if she heard anything. She looked at me weirdly, saying, "I thought that was one of you walking around." That definitely creeped me out. We searched the area, but didn't see any signs of anything. Just some disheveled leaves that could have been tracks, but it's the woods. It's nearly impossible to say just based off that. We kept hiking that day, climbing higher up into the range. The trees got sparser, and the trail narrowed. That's when Kyle stopped and said, "Yo, you see that?" We all looked ahead. I swear to God, standing maybe 60 feet off the trail deep in the trees was someone, just barely visible, wearing something dark, not moving. Jake waved and yelled hello over trying to be friendly. We all looked over at him, probably wondering what the hell is he doing. Whoever or whatever it was didn't respond. They didn't even flinch. Mason said it was likely another hiker. It's October during all the foliage, if there's any time for people to be here hiking or camping like us. It's now, but it didn't feel right. No gear, no pack, just still, watching. Then they just walked away. Not down the trail into the woods, barely making a sound. We were all freaked, but Mason, he seemed stuck on the idea it was just another hiker. We should have turned around right then, but we didn't. That night, we set up camp again, a little higher up, still on the trail, but in a tight cluster of pines. We barely talked. None of us wanted to admit how weird things were getting. Mason kept trying to reassure us, but I could tell it was getting to him too. Around midnight, I woke up to rustling. Not footsteps this time, running, like something darting back and forth through the brush. Kyle slightly unzipped the tent and peeked out just barely, only enough to not be seen. I'll never forget his voice when he whispered, "Dude, there's someone out there." He waved me over, and when I looked, I caught a glimpse of something just slipping behind a tree. It was a face, just a face, but pulled back like it was hiding, and high up, really high up. This thing had to be extremely tall. I'm not exaggerating, at least 6'6". What the hell? I was praying this was a dream. We were just seeing something. We were still drunk from the beers we had at the fire. Then Danielle started yelling from her tent. I think my heart dropped down to my feet. I looked over at Kyle and could tell the same happened to him. But nothing, no noise, no more running, anything. We ran over to Danielle, realizing she must have scared it off. She was in her tent holding bear spray, crying to herself. We comforted her and brought her over to our tent. We sat up all night, taking turns watching. Nothing else happened. As soon as sunlight hit, we packed up fast. The worst part was on the hike out. We were probably less than a mile from the trailhead when we realized Jake wasn't with us. At first, we thought he was just behind. He liked to stop and take photos. But that made no sense. Why the hell would he be taking photos during how tense of a moment this is? He was helping us to watch the tent. He knew what was out there. 10 minutes turned into 30, then an hour. We split up a little to look, looping back, yelling his name. We never found him. No answer, no tracks, no sounds, no gear. We called search and rescue. The school, local police, everything. They combed the area for days. Drones, dogs, helicopters, nothing. It's nearly a decade later. Jake is still missing to this day. His phone last pinged near the trail the same morning we lost him. They ruled it an unsolved disappearance. Likely a black bear. But here's the part I haven't told anyone. Not the police, not his parents. A week later, I got an airdrop request on my phone while I was home. It said, Jake's iPhone. The image that came through was pitch black. But when I brightened it, there was something. Long. Limbs. A face that looked directly in the camera. And a smile stretched wider than physically possible. It was taken out in those trees where we saw that figure. The timestamp, 3:11 a.m., the night after Jake disappeared. I don't know what we saw out there. I don't know if I'm going insane. I own a home now and work a job a state away. I still hear things in the woods behind my house. Sometimes I think I do even in my house. I haven't spoken to the group much since we graduated college. Except for Danielle, she claims to still hear and see things, like she's being followed. Apparently Kyle tells her the same. If we're not going insane, and it wasn't a bear like the police say, then we're being stalked by something, or someone. maybe even more than one. Even all these years later, and something tells me it doesn't plan on stopping anytime soon. I don't know if Jake is dead, if he's alive somewhere being tortured. I have no idea, but I swear sometimes the noises here in the woods behind my home is his voice, calling out to me, telling me to come to him. If you're hiking in New Hampshire, don't go off trail, and don't ignore that feeling when you're being watched. Because I don't know what, but something or someone is out there, and it took Jake. Story 3. My mom keeps texting me, but she died last year. It started 2 nights ago. I got a text from my mom's number that said, "Did you lock the door?" I froze. Her number had been disconnected after the funeral. I told myself it was some kind of scam or someone using her old number, but the texts kept coming. Last night, I got another one. "Someone's in the hallway." I checked, shaking, but the hall was empty. I didn't sleep at all. Tonight, I decided to text back. I typed, "Who is this?" and hit send. A minute later, I got a photo in return, blurry, taken from the end of the hallway. It showed me, sitting on my bed, looking at my phone. I dropped the phone and ran to the hallway, but no one was there. My front door was still locked, my windows shut tight. I checked the photo again, zooming in, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't before, a faint figure behind me in the picture. A woman's silhouette. Her hand was reaching out toward my shoulder. I tried to call the number, but it went straight to voicemail. The automated voice said the number was no longer in service. That's when I heard my phone buzz again. Another text. It said, "Don't be scared, honey. I just wanted to make sure you were safe." My eyes filled with tears. I whispered, "Mom?" into the silence. Then another message appeared. This time, the words were shaky, letters uneven, like she was struggling to type. "He's in the house!" Before I could move, I heard the floorboards creak behind me. Slowly, I turned toward the sound. My phone slipped from my hand, the screen still glowing with the final message that just appeared. "Run." I bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The lock was cold, almost frozen. I could hear slow, heavy breathing coming from somewhere in the dark living room. Every instinct told me not to look, but I did anyway. There was a man standing there, or something shaped like one. His face was wrong blurred, like a smudge that kept shifting. I stumbled backward, grabbing my phone from the floor, trying to call 911, but the screen glitched, letters flickering between numbers and words. Then, for a split second, Mom's contact photo appeared again. The phone vibrated once more, and a voice message started playing automatically. It was her voice, weak, distorted. "I tried to warn you." He followed me from the other side. The lights flickered out completely. I could still hear her voice through the phone, whispering softly, "I love you." And underneath that breathing, closer now, right behind me. That's the last thing I remember before everything went dark. I woke up this morning on the floor with my phone in my hand. All the texts and photos were gone. The call log was empty, but there was one new message waiting for me. No number, just words. "See you tonight, sweetheart." Story 4. 7 days, 7 true horror stories. Day 2/7. He can't sleep anymore. David was my friend. He was a good kid, full of energy, the kind of person who made friends easily, laughing at every little thing and pulling everyone along with him. No matter what was going on, he always found a way to make things lighter. It was almost impossible to feel sad around him. Poor guy. He was only 14, but he was consumed by an inhuman kind of insomnia. One night, he simply couldn't sleep. He said it felt impossible to even get close to falling asleep, and when he finally did, his body would twitch, and he'd wake up instantly. That first night, David treated it like a joke. He said it was weird not being able to sleep, but he didn't really care. He used the extra hours to play Fortnite all night long, making the most of it to rush as much as he could. He came to school tired, but still full of his usual energy. He told us he hadn't slept the night before, and might just fall asleep in class. We distracted the teacher, so David could try to take a nap, but he couldn't. Maybe it just wasn't comfortable enough to sleep at school. We tried to help, but nothing worked. He just thanked us and laughed about the whole situation. "I think I've turned into some kind of owl that never sleeps," he said, trying to imitate an owl's hoot and failing miserably. The day went on as usual. He didn't seem that bad yet. Unfortunately, the second night wasn't any different for him. When night came, he didn't even stay up late on his computer this time. He just lay down at 7 p.m. and tried to sleep. But his brain wouldn't stop. He just couldn't turn it off and rest. His eyes would sometimes get heavy. The exhaustion was clearly winning. He started hearing everything. I mean everything. The sound of his mom washing the dishes, the crickets outside, even his own breathing. Maybe he was starting to lose it, and that wasn't a good sign. He kept tossing and turning in bed, putting the pillow over his head to block the noise, but nothing worked. He texted me saying he still couldn't sleep. I told him to talk to his parents, maybe take something to help him rest, but he said he didn't want to bother anyone. The next morning at school, David looked awful. Dark circles under his eyes, his face tired and pale. He looked like he could fall asleep at any moment, but still couldn't. We were all starting to get really worried. He was like a zombie, lifeless face, clumsy walk. His relationship with sleep was like a balloon filled with air. No matter how much you blew, it would never pop. Just keep stretching. That's how it was with his sleep. He was always getting sleepier, but never able to actually fall asleep. He couldn't focus in class anymore. He was physically tired. You could see it, but he was incapable of sleeping. He'd just stare blankly at the board full of notes, not really seeing any of it. Then he said something weird. He remembered hearing someone call his name during the night. He got up to check, but his parents were asleep, and no one else was home. It could have been his imagination, but he swore he heard it. He promised he wasn't going crazy, but looking at the state he was in, it was hard to believe him. It was already starting to affect him at home and at school. His energy was gone, and so was his will to do anything. It was as if something was draining every last drop of life from him, stripping away what little sanity he still had left. His memory was fading too. He couldn't remember much, and whatever he did remember slipped away soon after. That night, around 9 p.m., David texted me, "Bro, can you sleep over tonight? I need help." It was a scary message. 2 nights without sleep were tearing him apart. I explained the situation to my mom and went to his house. Luckily, he didn't live far. His parents welcomed me in, saying they thought the insomnia was because of video games. Typical parent thing to say. David was in his room. It was completely dark. He was curled up in bed. "Hey, Bob. I'm glad you came," he said in a tired voice, standing up and walking toward me. "My name isn't Bob." I corrected him, and he apologized, saying that not sleeping was really messing him up. He'd even forgotten where the bathroom in his own house was a state as miserable as the people who actually suffer from that kind of condition. He showed me a list of things we could try to help him sleep. We tried everything: warm milk, a hot shower, meditation, but nothing worked, and it was frustrating him. He lay down and asked me not to leave the room, so I sat in the spinning chair, silent. The atmosphere felt heavy. Then I noticed the smell something foul, like mold, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Minutes went by, 20, 30, almost an hour. He started breathing deeply, almost falling asleep. We both felt a small wave of relief, but it didn't last long. The comfort vanished, replaced by a deep, suffocating sense of fear. That's when the spasms began. His whole body tensed up, like he'd been shocked. A gasp caught in his throat, eyes wide with terror. Then another spasm, and another. It was like he wanted to sleep to let himself drift off, but something inside him was violently fighting against it. His body wouldn't let him sleep. He was incapable of it. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, frozen, watching him writhe in pain. He was crying, but without making a sound, as if he didn't want to worry me. But his eyes were begging for help. He always woke up terrified after the spasms, gasping for air, like every breath was a fight. Sometimes he coughed from inhaling too hard, saliva dripping from his mouth as his body struggled to clear enough space for the oxygen to pass through. He sat up in bed, his eyes red and glassy. We were out of ideas, and David seemed to have lost all hope. He rocked back and forth, visibly broken. It was almost 2 a.m., and I was barely holding on, exhausted, but I had to stay strong for my friend. I didn't know what else to do. David said something, but I was so sleepy I couldn't even understand. I touched the bed, and it was like my body gave up. I passed out instantly. That must have felt like an insult to him. I could sleep. He couldn't. I woke up later to the sound of David crying. He cried almost the entire night. Maybe he was jealous that I could fall asleep. It was hard to see him like that, so full of emotion, so broken. He used to be pure energy and laughter. Now, I just felt sorry for him. "Who's there?" he suddenly shouted toward the door. I got up and asked what was happening, but he ignored me, only reacting when I touched his shoulder. It was freezing cold. His dark circles were worse than ever. It was 5 a.m. now. The sun would be rising soon, but that didn't bring him any comfort. He scratched his face with his nails so hard that he left marks. It was the third night he hadn't slept, and things were only getting worse. David had stopped eating properly. He was thinner, paler, and weaker each day. I left his house that morning, and later I heard he spent the whole day lying on the floor of his room, refusing to move. On the 5th day, he no longer went to school, didn't leave his room, and rarely ate anything. He discovered that losing oxygen could make him pass out, and that was his only hope. He almost died, but still couldn't sleep. His frustration grew so intense that he slammed his arm against the wall and ended up breaking it. He was already so weak, his bones felt like the thinnest ice. His flesh and muscles no longer held together, they withered and seemed to rot. His mind, clearly shattered, began to play tricks on him. He saw things that weren't there, couldn't look at his parents without seeing their faces melting and dissolving right in front of him. He heard voices even when he was completely alone, strange sounds that made no sense. He had forgotten how to speak, only mumbling meaningless things. The few words he could manage to say were fragmented and incoherent. The frustration was visible, even if he could no longer express it with words. With every failed attempt, he gasped for air, his breathing becoming erratic, and saliva dripped from the corner of his mouth, a cruel reminder that communication, something once so natural, was now slipping away from him like sand through his fingers. David was truly a good friend and an incredible person, but his situation was heartbreaking. We were all worried teachers, his parents, everyone tried to find some kind of treatment, but nothing worked. Some friends and I went to his house to check if there had been any improvement. His parents looked as if they were in mourning. They couldn't stop crying over their son's condition. He was in his room, lying in the middle of the floor, motionless, staring blankly at the ceiling. He neither spoke nor moved, but in that state, he didn't even seem capable of it. He did nothing anymore, only breathed and existed. There was no hope for recovery, just the quiet, waiting for death to come. It's strange to think that this would be the only sleep he had left. What once was fear now seemed like a silent plea, a yearning for the rest that death would bring. Even though we were all close friends, it was impossible to stay in that room, grotesque, heavy, filled with a moldy smell that seemed to come from David himself. His presence made the air dark, morbid, and suffocating. I remember the day when several ambulances stopped in front of his house. They tried every method they had, but he still didn't sleep. His case was something to be studied. They managed to knock him out with several medications, but soon after, he started convulsing and woke up again. They tried to stop the seizures, holding down his arms and legs, but it didn't help. The mild convulsions grew stronger. He wouldn't stop, thrashing even while restrained. At one point, they had to let him go because he was shattering the bones in his arm, nearly tearing it off. He was taken to the hospital, but nothing could help. His parents received financial aid that covered all the medical expenses. They wanted doctors to study David, to find a solution for his personal hell, until one day, he simply disappeared from the hospital, gone in the middle of the night without anyone noticing. By morning, he wasn't there anymore. Everyone was worried and confused about how he managed to escape. They searched for him for days, but there was no sign of David. Until, after more than a week of searching, David was found, or at least, his body was. He was discovered lifeless in his bedroom. His body had completely wasted away, malnourished, his broken bones piercing through his flesh. His eyes were dry. He had cried so much that there were no tears left. David didn't deserve such an ending. A sudden insomnia had brought him to ruin. At least, I can find some comfort thinking that he finally defeated his insomnia, and now he rests forever. Thank you for watching Nightmare Proof. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep the nightmares alive. Have a story of your own? Send it in, and you may hear it here next time. Until then, sleep well if you can.